What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Wake and Jake College Football Show. Today, getting into my biggest questions for the ACC this season. Already have done the Big Ten, already have done the SEC. Next week, we'll obviously get into the Big 12. I will throw in there the Pac 2 and Notre Dame as well. Those I'll do as their own little bonus episode, I guess you could say. And then, we're starting to get into the nuts and bolts of the season. We've got conference previews, win totals, playoff predictions, media days. Uh, it's starting to get real. The season is almost here, and I'm I'm so excited for it. I'm ready for college football to start. Um, Also going to do Dude, Are You High? We're going to do that today. And then I did want to touch on not necessarily news, I guess, but EA did come out and release the top 25 hardest places to play for the new college football game, and I've got some thoughts on it. So yeah, we'll get into that. But yeah, that's what to expect with today's episode. So let's have a good wake and bake sesh and get right into it. All right. EA Sports released their top 25 hardest places to play for the college football game. It's a video game, so we can't get too upset, I guess, by these rankings. At the same time, it did seem a little ridiculous with where they ranked some stadiums or places to play. Uh, Oregon being the ninth toughest place to play in all of college football. I'm not saying that they don't deserve to be in the top 25, top 20, top 15, but to be top 10 feels like a little bit of a stretch. Now, I'll also say this. I have been to very few of these stadiums that were listed in the top 25. So I am not speaking from experience. So I guess take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but Oregon being in the top 10 seems a little bit of a far-fetched dream right there. Uh, and maybe this next one could be just because I don't necessarily care for this team. But Wisconsin being in the top 15 ahead of teams like Notre Dame, Auburn, South Carolina, even Iowa, I felt like that was a little bit of a stretch. I'm not saying again that they shouldn't be top 25, but to be ranked ahead of those teams, eh. But again, that far back, I guess, take with a grain of salt. I'm also biased because I just don't like Wisconsin. Uh, if Utah wasn't such a hard place to play at night, because for some reason night games at Utah are impossible to win. If it wasn't for them being so difficult to play at night, I would laugh at Utah being on this list. But because of that nighttime home field advantage, I can get by with it. The biggest uh, slight, I guess you could say, against a team that they had was putting Tennessee at 12. When it comes to these rankings, ranking the top three, the top five, you could maybe go as far as the top 10, but I would say top five for sure. Put them in any order, and you're probably going to be like, all right, I can live with that. Maybe would switch one or two around. But to not have Tennessee, not in the top three, not in the top five, not even in the top 10 toughest places to play, seemed a little crazy. I just feel like of all the ridiculous or the ones that I thought were ranked too highly, they were ranked too low. I feel like Tennessee should be, top five, at least, at the very minimum, top 10, but to be 12 seemed a little ridiculous. And turns out I'm not the only one who thought so. A lot of people wondering what drugs they were taking to put Tennessee at 12. All right, let's get into my biggest questions for the ACC. Per usual, alphabetical. We are going to start with Boston College. Can Boston College repeat the success that they had in year one of Bill O'Brien? And I'll say this, I think Bill O'Brien's going to be good for Boston College in the long run. I think he is a very good coach. Um, I was and still am a fan of that hire so far, and I think overall he is going to be successful. That being said, I don't know if we will see Boston College repeat last year and go 7-5. Uh, at Michigan State is not necessarily an easy game. Home against Clemson, at Louisville, and then home against Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, and SMU. That is a tough schedule. Say what you want about SMU, fine. You know, some people might think they're overrated, whatever. I'm very high on Georgia Tech. I am. I also think Michigan State is going to be better this year. And then Clemson's obviously good. Louisville has been good under Jeff Brom. And Notre Dame just played for a national championship. That's a pretty tough schedule. On top of it, at Pitt and at Syracuse are not a guaranteed win. So, I mean, those are also going to be tough games. I don't think we see the exact same success we saw last year with Boston College. I do think, though, in the long run, Bill O'Brien is the answer or is a good coach for them. Cal. What does Cal even look like this year? They first season in the ACC. Honestly, you could ask for a better start, I guess, but from what people were expecting to what they did in the ACC was impressive. They went 6-6, but of those 6 losses, 4 of them were just absolutely heartbreaking. And they were like one right after the other, just one score losses and games that you probably should have won and just lost it in the end, gave up a lead, this or that, just very unlucky. So then you think, well, they got Jaden out another year, Fernando Mendoza, let's run it back. Let's not lose these one-score games and have a great season in the ACC. And then they just got absolutely decimated by the portal. They have 33 outgoing transfers and 38 incoming. 7 total starters returning this year. There are times when you see a team overhaul their roster like this, and it's on purpose and it's a good thing. Because the team was really bad last year, just needed a new roster, this or that. I don't think this is going to be good for Cal because they were decent last year and they were looking to be on the up and up, and then to just have your roster completely decimated, people coming in and just plucking all your best players, that's tough. I don't think we're going to see the same success this year for Cal in the ACC. Um, tough losing that many players to the portal when you didn't want to. Clemson. This one's gonna be. I got to be careful how I word this because I don't want it to be misconstrued that I think my goodness, that I think Clemson is a bad team. But can they beat my fraud accusations? Last year I was hard on Clemson because anytime they played a great to very good team, they lost more often than not. They Georgia destroyed. Louisville, I guess not destroyed, but they lost. South Carolina lost. Texas lost. You can say SMU, fine, whatever. I'll give you that, I guess. You can say Pitt because at the time they were still a good team, but they lost 6 straight to end the season. Um, this year they've got a similar schedule, which basically means 9. I'm not going to say guaranteed because nothing's a guaranteed. 9 wins for Clemson and 3 potential losses. I'm not saying they're going to lose those games, but they're potential losses. So that's 9-3. I would say is your floor for Clemson. Bring back 8 starters on both sides of the ball, which, again, with some teams, when you see them return this many starters on both sides, sometimes that's not a good thing. For Clemson, I think it'll be good. Including one of these starters is your Heisman contender quarterback, Cade Klubnik. I have very high expectations for Clemson this year. One of their losable games is opening week against LSU. I like Clemson in that one, if I'm going to be honest. We all know Brian Kelly's, well, we don't need to get into it. I like Clemson this year. I think they're going to be a good year. I do think they beat my fraud accusations. Can Duke's run game improve this season? Last year, Manny Diaz took over as coach. Defense was good. Defense was very good. Offensively, had their moments. Passing game was good. And I think part of the reason the pass game was so good is because they had to throw it a lot because the run game was not. Offensive line, you could argue, was not necessarily the greatest, but 92 rush yards, almost 90, well, 92 and a half rush yards a game. That's not good. Surprisingly, not worse than the ACC, but second worst. I don't I don't see how the run game is going to improve at least that much this year. Do I think it will be better? I guess because it's hard to be worse than last year. So I guess sure, yes, it is going to be improved this year. I just don't see it being great or good. Um, and even when you just look at what they did in the portal, they lost four running backs in the portal. They did bring one in. Didn't really bring in some offensive line help through the portal, which I guess you could say they might be a good thing because maybe they have hopes in the line this year. I don't know. They did bring in seven true freshmen this year for offensive line, so clearly they know they need to be better, and that's what they've been doing in recruiting. Um, but yeah, I guess it is going to be better this year. I just don't see it being that much better. Florida State, this one's obvious. Um, can they bounce back after such an atrocious season? Uh, they go from being snubbed for the playoff, which we don't need to get into that. We could do a whole segment on that. Get snubbed for the playoff. Come in this last year ranked. Everybody expects, yep, they're going to make the 12-team playoff, no problem. And then they go 2-10, just ugly. Uh, and let's be honest. I mean, can they bounce back? Sure, because I don't think it's going to be worse than last year. But are they going to be playoff contenders? I don't know. Mike Norvell is definitely coaching like a coach who's on the hot seat. Brand new offense, only one returning starter. Brought in a new offensive coordinator, Gus Malzahn. Brought in a new defensive coordinator, Tony White. Had 33 players leave in the transfer portal, which again, probably not the worst thing in the world. Brought in 23. They will be better this year. I just don't think they're going to be competing for the ACC championship or a playoff spot. Um, yeah, just don't see it. Georgia Tech, I'm high on Georgia Tech. I'll just come out and say it. If you heard me talk about them last year, you know I'm high on Haynes King. So that being said, can Georgia Tech compete for an ACC championship game and possibly a playoff spot? Uh, they went 7-5 last year. Haynes King was hurt, and I said it all last year. If Haynes King plays, you have a chance to win. If he can stay healthy, I think Georgia Tech is going to be a team to be reckoned with. I think they may play for an ACC championship game, and I think playoffs could be on the schedule or on the table for them. When we look at their schedule, there are 10 winnable games. They avoid Miami, they avoid Louisville, they avoid SMU. Um, it's a very manageable schedule, and there are 10 wins on the schedule. I think Georgia Tech might be competing or at least in a playoff discussion at the end of the year. For Louisville, how good is their defensive line going to be? I know this is not going to be shocking, but Jeff Brom went portal heavy again. He's like Lane Kiffin in that sense, where they just turn over that roster every year with a bunch of transfers and bring in a bunch of transfer depth and also have a lot of guys leave. Well, yeah, I guess a lot because they had 30 or 28 guys that left, but they had 30 incoming. Of those 30, though, that are transferring in, 15 of them are on the defensive side, and 7 of those 15 are on the defensive line. I don't know if any of them are going to be able to replace Ashton Gillette. I know he didn't put up crazy sack numbers last year, but he was still somebody that you had to make an effort to stop. Uh, I'm sure Jeff Brom's going to make it work out. I'm sure Louisville's going to be another 9-3 team this year, or 8-4, or 10-2. It's going to happen again. I expect him to make it work. That is my biggest question for Louisville this year. Miami, do they strike gold 2 years in a row? Last year, brought in Cam Ward, absolutely lit it up. This year they bring in Carson Beck. Um, I know there's a lot of hate around Carson Beck, and I kind of get it. I am not out on him, I guess, as much as everybody else seems to be. This year will do a lot for that, but I don't think his struggles last year were all his fault because, if we go back and listen to the SEC episode, my biggest question for Georgia this year was, can they stop dropping the ball? They were dropping everything, and I'm not saying, like I said, Carson Beck had some throws that were very questionable throughout the year, but again, not all his fault. I don't think his receivers were very good. Goes to Miami. I think, honestly, I think playing at Miami without is going to be a lot less pressure on Carson Beck too than it would be at Georgia. Georgia expects the best. Miami, you're going to be kind of left alone for the most part, which I think will be good for Carson Beck. I do think Miami has struck gold again. I think Carson Beck is going to have a great year. My biggest concern with them, I guess, and this is not a question, it's Mario Cristobal. I just don't trust Mario Cristobal. But I do think Miami has struck gold for the second time in as many years. North Carolina, obvious. What is the Bill Belichick experience going to be like? It's already hasn't even coached one game yet, and it's already been a wild ride. His girlfriend Jordan is taking all the headlines. There's all these rumors. Is she running everything behind the scenes, or that she needs to be tagged in emails? It's been a whole thing. There's a lot of people who think Bill Belichick was going to be gone before the season even started. I don't think that's going to happen. That was a rumor I did hear, though. Um, Bill Belichick coaching North Carolina is going to be a fun ride. I hope it's at least somewhat successful. I hope it's not an absolute dumpster fire because it just would be so sad to see one of the greatest of all time go out in such an embarrassing fashion. Um, Again, I'm not saying he's going to be great. I just hope he's not terrible. But it is going to be a wild ride. NC State. Can the defense be better? Uh, since 2017, Dave Doran has had 2 seasons where he won less than 8 games. 2019 and last year. Last year was not a good season. Offense was kind of up and down, just average, nothing special. They also weren't the worst. Uh, Defense, on the other hand, was not good. They have a new defensive coordinator. Can't think of his name. He's now the head coach at Marshall. Bringing in a new defense coordinator. They had, of their 17 transfers, 12 were on the defensive side of the ball. They clearly know that defense was the issue last year and they need help. Um, there's no reason why they shouldn't be better this year. I have all the faith in Dave Doran. He's proven it year in and year out that he is going to be a good 8-4, 9-3 coach. I expect him to get it figured out. For Pitt, I was trying to. I mean, you look at last year. Started 7-0. Everybody's like, "Holy shit, where'd this come from?" And then they go 0-6 the rest of the season. And part of the, I mean, yes, some of it was the offense and that 6-game losing streak, but their defense, their pass defense, was not good. And that's part of the reason of their 6-game skid to end the season. So for Pitt, my biggest question is, can that secondary be improved this year? Um, I mean, they brought in some guys in the secondary through the transfer portal, brought in some pass rushers. Can they be better? Sure. Will they be better? Remains to be seen. I didn't see any crazy moves to improve that secondary. Um, they cannot do what they did last year, going 7-0 and 0-6. It would be so funny if they did. That can't happen. And in order for that not to happen, yes, they need some offensive consistency, but that secondary needs to be improved. For SMU, can they repeat that first year success that they had in the ACC? Um, an amazing first season for SMU last year for the ACC, joining the ACC for the first time. 11-1, but they also had a relatively easy schedule. This year, that schedule is significantly harder. I don't expect them to go 11-1 again. That's just unrealistic. But I do expect 9-3, maybe 10-2. 8-4, I guess, is also a possibility. I think they have a good another good season in the ACC. I just don't think it's going to be playing for an ACC championship again. Uh, Stanford, I was trying to be nice. Can they just not be the worst team in the ACC? I mean, yes, it is a possibility. It's going to be a toss-up between them and Wake Forest. But if you look at their schedules, Wake Forest has a much easier schedule, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Will they be the worst team? Yes, probably. Can they? Is there a chance that they're not? I guess. Like I said, Wake Forest. But I fully expect Stanford to have a just long, brutal season. Um, Syracuse, can they even make a bowl game this year? Had an amazing first year under Fran Brown. Went 9-3, 5-3 in the ACC. But this year they have a very tough schedule. They play a neutral site game against Tennessee to open the season. They're at Clemson, at SMU, at Georgia Tech, at Miami, and at Notre Dame. That is an absolute gauntlet. I think, yes, 9-3 was great last year. I don't think that gets repeated this year. I think if you make a bowl game this year, that we're just going to call that a successful season for Syracuse. Do I think the future is bright for them with Fran Brown? So far, yes. I just think this year might be a little rough for Syracuse. Virginia, does Tony Elliott get fired? He's been around for long enough. This is his fourth season. 11-23 overall, 6-17 in the ACC. I mean, they have a much easier schedule this year. They play Louisville, but they avoid Georgia Tech, Miami, Clemson, SMU. Um, Making a bowl game is on the table. I'll just say that. As crazy as that sounds, making a bowl game is on the table for Virginia, and honestly, that might be the worst thing that could happen for them. Tony Elliott has shown little to no improvement in his 3 seasons going on to 4. He makes a bowl game for Virginia, they might hold on to him, and then next year, who knows what's going to happen. And they may regret keeping him around that extra year. We'll see. But making a bowl game is on the table for Virginia. Virginia Tech, this is a very similar one to Cal. What is Virginia Tech going to look like this year? Complete brand new team. 30 incoming and outgoing transfers, 5 total returning starters, 2 on offense, 3 on defense. It's a brand new team all around. One of the 5 returning starters, though, is Kyron Drones, which is huge for Virginia Tech, keeping him 1 more year. I'm confident that Virginia Tech will at least not be worse than last year. They were, 6-6? I think 6-6 is reasonable again. I don't. It's hard to tell. It's a brand new team, but Kyron Drones sticking around another year does give me a little more hope that they can at least repeat what they did last year. And then finally, we got Wake Forest. Can Wake Forest make a bowl game in their first year under Jake Dickert? And it's possible because this is a schedule. It's a doable schedule. It's possible. I'm gonna say that it's possible. If I were to bet money on it, I would lean more no, but it is possible. Hardest games are Georgia Tech at home and SMU at home, but they avoid Miami, Louisville, and Clemson. A 6-6 season is doable. I wouldn't put money on it, but it is doable. All right, finishing up with my favorite segment, dude. Are you high? And this week that is Thomas Castellanos. Go look up this interview he did with On3. I think it was Pete Nakos. Just an absurd interview. Starts calling out Alabama, saying that they're not that tough or that Florida State's going to win, which I get it. You want to say you're going to win. But don't say that it's about Alabama. We don't want them getting pissed and going on a rampage. And then he started calling out his former teammates at Boston College, saying how he had no help, and then also making claims that he tore up the ACC, which he did not. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big Thomas Castellanos fan. He was fun to watch at Boston College. He did not tear up the ACC. And to then blame your teammates saying you had no help, That is just false. Boston College has had some talented receivers over the last few years. Just an absurd interview. Go look it up. Saying just all the wrong things. I want to like Thomas Castellanos, but it's when you do absurd interviews like that, it's hard to like him, and you just gotta wonder, dude, are you high? Thank you all for joining me for another Wake and Bake Sesh. I'll be back next week to finish up with my biggest questions for the Big 12. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we start getting into the thick of it. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. I'll talk to you guys next time.